Okay, everybody, welcome back to Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman, that good-looking, fine young man out in San Diego, California, and me, Fred Carroll, sitting here in rainy, hot, steamy Connecticut. It's actually not steamy. It's probably closer to your weather. We're in that high 70s, low 80s right now with the rain coming.
Yeah, we're about the same right now at the coast, but it's hot out here in the western states. I'll tell you, when you've seen Texas, it's been we're by the coast, we're on a mountain, so we're probably about 2 mile and a half, 2 miles from the ocean. So we're getting a breeze, which is nice. And it's probably one of the most comfortable areas in California right now. So unless you're on the coast somewhere else up north.
So I will say we got some nice messages. A few people chimed in because last week we kind of used politics, but we talked about it in a very, I guess, mature way. And we talked about it from a addiction and from a mental health standpoint. And people enjoyed that, the people that chimed in. One of them had mentioned that it's interesting that we stated, kind of that old school values of politics versus today's standards, which are driven by the internet and such. So they like that. So, and they do believe, a lot of them do believe the addiction is there, the political addiction.
You mean for the people trying to climb the ladder?
Yeah, well, it is. So yesterday we had our, a day where Biden stepped down. What did you think of it? Did you expect that when you heard it?
Well, I don't probably have enough history with politics. I was apolitical for so long. I never really watched what was going on because when you're in the nonprofit world, A, you're not supposed to bring politics in. B, when you're raising resources, you have to be cautious so you don't offend a party member who doesn't want to support you because they think you're taking a political position. So I kind of watching Trump, watching Biden and Trump at that, debate really concerned me. And I worried about, and I've been worried about Biden because he's really, in my opinion, slowed down a lot physically. And I'm just talking about what I've observed. And I didn't,
right.
Not that he was ill, but he just, whatever's going on with the AGE seemed to really be accelerating. So I assumed that he was going to, with all the pressure he was getting from the people closest to him. And, when Pelosi came out and people were getting ready to do commercials about him, I don't know how he could stay in the race because he's too much of a, I'm here for the people. And if he felt like he was going to interfere with the Democratic Party, potentially winning the election, that he would either be forced to step down or, do what he did. And I think doing what he did made it a lot easier on everybody. And, the fact that he tapped Kamala Harris on the shoulder so quickly, I thought was a good thing. So that, and look at the money that was raised last night. Was it up to 80 million now? That's remarkable. I think it says something. And what I've been hearing, like you've been hearing, is he's too old. He's too criminally and drowning. And nobody wanted either one of them. But between the two, technically, Trump appeared to be a little more robust and influential. And I just think he's so self-agendized that I was concerned. And now, the turnaround is I'm the prosecutor and he's the individual being prosecuted. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how it goes. And it's a very short time. It was 105 days for the election. So I think it'll be
like that. So
I felt energized, though. I thought it was a good thing. I think it's going to be a better race now, and it's going to be hard to find something bad on Kamala based on her history and what she's done. And she's married to she's African American and Asian, and he's a white guy and he's Jewish, and they have a daughter who supports Hamas. So it'll be interesting to see how the process gets vetted, and I'm assuming she'll win the nomination, and then. She's already been in that second seat, so to speak, for years. So I think that'll allow her to hit the ground running. And, I'm sure she has different thoughts about different things that have happened. And, I can't even imagine what it's like to be in that kind of a power position where you've got so much responsibility and thousands of people that are reporting, up the stream to you that, running this country is tough enough, and then trying to sit on the global, system. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a better race. I really do. Because, they were just
Yeah.
filleting Biden every day. I mean, Trump himself and his team, just every time they opened their mouth, they would, instead of saying anything about their policies and their plan, they would just basically demean and degrade him. And I just thought, that's the politics you were saying earlier that are different today. I mean, what a way to get ahead. It'd be like me beating you up every show. And I guess if the ratings went way up and the viewership went way up, you'd say keep going. But I don't think that's the way the human race, not the way I work. I don't have that in my makeup.
Now, was prior to politics and stuff, was Kamala Harris, since you're from California, was she on your radar?
Yes, she was. Well, she was the attorney general, so she was on the criminal side. So, with the kind of work that I've always done, I knew who she was. And I think she was pretty proactive about not putting, men and women in prison and helping them get access to, alternative sentencing and treatment. So I've always been a fan of hers, just from that perspective. And then she went on to be senator. I wasn't tracking her. And, I didn't really track Biden. I think what happens in the White House is so, ivory towered in so many different ways. And I've tried for years, I've got text, my text to Biden. I've got supposedly his direct text to the White House, and people screen for him. And, I've been sending him stuff for a year. I don't hear back.
Yeah, well, that's how it is. So, yeah, so it's a big difference and stuff. What I still, to keep it more on our show's topics and stuff, what I still don't like is the internet. I'll never understand this point. I guess it's similar to sports and stuff like that. Like I could put it in a Red Sox Yankee terms. How no matter how, like for me, I'll speak for myself. No matter how good the Yankees are, you'll never hear it out of my mouth. You'll never hear me say the Yankees are great. Yeah, I think they're going to win it all. I'll never say those words. Never. I mean, I just did say them, but I'll never say them in a conversation. You'll never hear it. But it's very similar where all these people that support Donald Trump have been calling this guy old, useless, can't run the country. He is unfit for the job. Now he comes out and says, okay, I'm not going to run. And it's still not good enough. Now they're complaining that it's coercion. And like they always have to have something to complain about. But I understand that from a sports perspective. But don't you think some of this border stuff, which he's heavy on and she's heavily involved in, is going to be the main focal point at this point?
Well, I think it's kind of like abortion, It's one of those topics that seems to be a major divider. And when they talk about the border thing, I mean, and look, again, I live in a border town, so I see it through a whole different lens than other parts of the country does. And, we do a lot of business cross-border here in San Diego, and a lot of people live in Tijuana and come across and work here, and those are Americans. It's very inexpensive compared to our community, and it's expensive to live in this community. And, we have over 95,000 people cross the border every day through the mainstream border, through either a car or walking over the border bridges. So, and it's always been like that. So I don't know how other people look at it, but the things that, Trump and his people talk about and, how they contaminate the population, I can't spend any more time with it. I've been listening to it.
I think the one woman at the RNC event that happened last week that spoke about her son dying of fentanyl. You saw that woman?
I did.
I understand her issues and her complaints and her pains, but I didn't understand her solutions because they only involved Mexico. And I think she's been misguided and aimed towards that's the only place fentanyl is coming It's not widespread coming in. So I don't know if that, but it was nice. I will say it was nice to finally see fentanyl be mentioned in any kind of capacity in a political event.
I agree. And remember, at the debate, we talked about this last week. Trump didn't say anything about it. Biden said we need, more equipment at the border to do scanning. And again, they claim, the Border Patrol, that they only stop up to 2% of the 95,000 people every day, stop or ask questions or push them into secondary to search their vehicle. So if they were to start stopping 4% or 5%, it would become such a traffic jam. People wouldn't be able to get across for work, and they wouldn't be able to have the kind of level of commerce because it would just become a parking lot. So, and when you think about it, the cartel's going to find a way. I mean, I've known stories for years about things coming on shipping containers, and that's not necessarily a border problem. They come in and they dock wherever they dock, whether it's New York or Florida or Texas, and wherever there's a body of water along the border where they can get to a place to drop off their freight. We have a big place in Long Beach, just an hour and a half north of us. And those things come in, large containers, and then they get distributed. So that's not even what they're talking about. They're talking about the southern border. And they think if they locked it off and built a wall and nobody got through, the cartel would find another way. They'd hide it.
I believe she mentioned the cartel and that, how we don't punish the cartel or all that stuff. I think she was a little either misguided or purposely misguided to believe that that's possible. Like these cartels aren't, I think she thinks it's like the Godfather movie where there's 5 people running these things when she doesn't realize there are cities, controlling this. It is a problem. Listen, it is a problem. We know it's a problem, but stopping it doesn't seem to be as easy as she may have either been led to believe or claims to believe.
There's too much money in it. It's always going to get across. And for me, it's going to be education. It's going to be intervention and prevention and educating our youth to make a more informed decision. Because blaming the cartel for the opioid problem is like blaming Budweiser for the DUI problem. Meaning, they're not making you take the drugs. You're taking the drugs. And if the drugs weren't there, would there still be a problem? Well, look at alcohol. Look at how alcoholism. Look at methamphetamine. And now, because fentanyl, again, is a synthetic opioid, it can be made anywhere. And now that, people know how to get the precursors on the black market, we have to find a way to encourage people to make a decision that potentially what they're taking could kill them. And I don't believe in the just say no concept because data showed that didn't work. So
that doesn't work. And these kids, let's keep it in a kid's age range. I remember being 14, 15, 16 and up. I didn't think of what I was ingesting, whether it was cigarettes or anything. I knew cigarettes were bad for you, but they weren't bad for me. I was going to beat it. I'm fine. I'm waking up. I'm not coughing. I'm not dying. I'm only 14, 15 years old. So, and then there's the peer pressures that come in to drug use. If the cool kids or quote unquote cool kids are doing it, there's sexuality comes into play with it, where maybe a girl you're trying to date, is involved in that. So you're trying to show off and stuff. And then there's it's not like they make you feel drugs. The whole, version of them is to make you feel better, and stuff, or happier or higher or whatever the word is. And a lot of them do that in certain instances. And then the next time you're dead, and that's what the point we got to get across, that it's spinning the chamber on a gun. You don't know if it has a bullet or not. So
Oh,
I don't
and
know.
I mentioned abortion. The gun issue is the same thing. I mean, look at this 20-year-old that had an AR-15 that was able to get on a rooftop close enough to shoot and kill people, including Trump. And, the head of the Secret Service is being filleted right now with the committee asking how that could possibly happen. And, they talked about it's a $3.1 billion budget. They have 8,000 employees and they only protect 36 people, which kind of sounds weird because they do other things. But it just goes to show no matter how careful and how good the planning is, if something like that can get through, imagine what's happening with the drugs. And that's not going to go away as long as we're the largest consumer on the planet of illicit drugs. And we are. And then, you shift over to marijuana that's getting legalized. I'm at a point now where it's just getting frustrating to talk about because I don't know if people are actually hearing the message on a prevention side, an education side. And, I've been doing some different things lately with the media and getting Rocky involved and talking to Michael Brown and a few others and putting messaging together that, he's a DEA agent retired. I'm a lived experience substance user and now in the treatment business and a crisis coach. We're hoping by having a duality of the conversation, we might wake a few more people up and encourage families to get more educated and then have conversations with their kids that are different than what they've had in the past. And then, of course, you factor in COVID and how much social media exposure kids got. It was just a perfect storm. A perfect storm.
Yeah, well, obviously the scare tactics don't work necessarily, especially the ones we went through, me and you as young kids and stuff. Like I remembered, this is your brain on drugs and stuff like that. That became more of a pop culture, almost like where's the beef, Wendy's type thing. It didn't deter me from doing drugs. It was more comedic almost. It was so over the top. So I think reality, and people have talked, they do like when me and you have conversations about things. And I hear from my friends and stuff because some of my friends watch some of my stuff. They don't always agree with our points, maybe politically or anything like that, but they're not, I guess, because we're not on here screaming and yelling. We're not telling you can't vote for your guy. We're not on here we're just trying to find a solution with whoever the president is. We want some of the solutions to be guided towards mental health and drug addiction and recovery. And I think that's what you're here for also. I believe I'll speak for you.
Thank you.
But I mean, you do believe that, right? That's all you really want is somebody to make this part of the be part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
Well, it's kind of like, the mountain climber that goes up a steep mountain, and isn't tethered to anything. There's a risk factor involved, and they know that. And, I don't know what the easy way is, and I think I told you I've been really involved recently with the media. I'm going into the studio tonight at 5:30 our time to talk again about homelessness. And I did 3 segments over the weekend, and I'm not soliciting them. They're calling me now because we're getting ready, or actually today's the day. The mayor and the city council are voting whether they want to put this 100-bed shelter together. And my argument is you put 1,000 people together that suffer from some form of addiction already and have mental health issues, and you put them under one roof, all you're going to do is basically just amplify the problem, 1,000 times. So, my pushback is we can't put that many people on the roof. It's just like putting people in prison. The difference in prison is they have access to health care. They can belong to a gang if they want to survive. And they have people, covering their backs. And all they have to do is try to find a way to stay alive 24 hours a day. Where homeless people are roaming around, doing different things, breaking into places, trying to get money so they can buy drugs. So my thought is don't put them all together. That's insane. And that's what my argument's been. And it's getting a lot of traction because it's really hard to find people that disagree with that thinking. Other than
I could only imagine what it's like because you do this for a job. This is not only your income, but it's also your passion. I don't do it full time or anything. And I get frustrated reading these stories of similar to you having funeral avoidance. I read articles and I'm like, why did this happen? Why is this happening again? And then tomorrow, I already know there's another article tomorrow and another story of another nobody that nobody knows, take away the fame out of it. Because that's the only time it's spun in any positive terms is when the person is famous or well liked. If it's just a Joe Nobody, it's they overdosed on drugs, and that's the whole story. But when it's somebody famous, they dig deeper in the story to what the problem could have been and what's the solution and what they believed and how good of a person they were. But you don't hear that about the others. They just minimalize the people and belittle them more than anything, and they're already gone. And it's quite frustrating to read it consistently when you're doing research and stuff.
Well, and I've seen this not only with the substance use disorders. I watched it with homelessness, and I also did it with people returning from prison, with the recidivism rate of people going back. So I've seen it with 3 separate populations with a common issue around the substance use disorders and the alcohol and people that are self-medicating. And what happens is the negative outcome becomes part of the landscape, and people step over homeless or cross the street. And they're like, those people have made a bad choice. Martha, let's just go to dinner, not come back down here and eat again. And then you look at places like Oakland in California, the retail crime and people talk about sitting at dinner and 4 people walk in, someone blocks the door, and they're all armed and they rob everybody in the restaurant. I mean, we are a little bit out of control as a population right now. And, our prison system doesn't work. But then the Secretary of Prisons just 3 years ago finally admitted, after 25 years of studies, we don't do rehab in prison. We say we do, and we try to, but it's not effective. So a lot of the tools that we're using aren't working. And that's been my position with our current leadership. And I said publicly, I've been through 5 mayors, in my world of servicing others. And I don't blame the current mayor. I mean, the homeless problem was here well before he got into office, but I do hold them accountable when you're in a leadership role and the problem gets worse during your tenure. So who's responsible? And, when I hear about the experts say, well, they point to this model, I think it's in Houston, and they said the reason they think it's working is because one person's in charge of the county, the city, the state, and they oversee the whole programmatic piece and the continuum of care. So there isn't a zip code specific division or a state county funding decision or division. There's one person who's in charge, which is technically what, our president and the politicians are supposed to be. They're supposed to be that trajectory to the top to get the resources to the communities to get things done. But when they're fighting each other, and now it's just politicians just want to be politicians because they want the power. They've got the money, or they think the money comes with the power, and the power has the money. So they forget. There's a story I'll tell you real quick. I don't know. I was probably in my teens, and my dad was telling me this story. He showed it to me. It was written somewhere about this guy, went to school here. I'll use San Diego as an example. Graduated and he got it, became a city council member. And there was a friend of his who was in the media, and he started writing about him. And then the guy got escalated, became a mayor, and his friend kept writing about him. And then, then he became next step an assembly person. And then he went on to the Senate. And then, so this friend of his who kept writing about him tried to get an appointment with him when he was in the Senate. And he met with them and he says, I always used to have access to you and you to me. And I wrote about your whole trajectory in your political career. Now you don't even return my calls. He goes, I really don't have time. Do you have any idea how hard it was for me to get here? So that kind of thinking, it changes. I mean, look, you talk to people that win the lottery. Those kind of things change. My trajectory's kind of been consistent. So I don't really, I don't know. I'm sure if all of a sudden somebody threw huge opportunity at me, I would probably be a little different. I'm not sure. I don't think so. Not at my age
so
now.
it sounds like what you're saying from that stories version, at least, is we have to start talking to the people on the lower rungs of the ladder. Those are the people that have time to make this part of their agenda. Because as they grow higher, the problems grow different. Some bigger, some, it depends who you are, of course, what you consider bigger, but could be from finances, money, all that. That's interesting, the way you said that, the way you told that story.
Yeah. Look at JD Vance and what happened with his mom, and she was on stage with him the other day at the RNC and talking about how she's got 10 years of sobriety, and he could have spent 15 minutes talking about recovery and accessing help and battling fentanyl. But it's almost like the way he was saying it, he was trying to reveal where he came from, but also that in my understanding is it can happen to anybody anywhere. I mean, look at President Biden and his son Hunter. He had a bad case of addiction with cocaine. And, as you and I've been doing this, when we started, 3 years ago, let's say 1 in 7 people knew someone who overdosed and died. And 3 years ago, it was like 1 in 3. And now it's like it's one-on-one. Everybody knows somebody now. So clearly, we don't have to be, brainiacs or scientists. You could look at that and go, well, clearly it's gotten worse and it's not getting better. And the only reason overdoses went down last year a little bit was because of Narcan. So they're reversing it, meaning the level of morbidity continues to grow. And I don't see wedges. I don't see backstops. I don't see safety nets. I don't see anything that I can put my finger on. And I'm a subject matter expert. That's really creating systemic change almost anywhere in the country. And then now these huge settlements, that are starting to roll out. People are arguing about where the money should go and how it's being spent. And just recently, there was a group in San Diego jumping around a little bit. They were going to build 75 tiny homes for homeless. And they had earmarked $10 million. And I guess the governor gave them and 3 or 4 other cities a sunset. If you're underway and you've got your permits and you're ready to go and you've got your bids, you're going to get the money. And San Diego, the area, either didn't move quick enough or they had to fight the community and weren't able to move fast enough. So the money was that was earmarked was removed. So now this big plan that's like 85% done has to stop because the money is gone and they have to find a way to replace it. And that's not going to come easy.
Yeah. Next week I'll bring in some information. We have an issue going on with tiny home. There's a gentleman in New Haven, from what I do know about it, who the town is trying to shut him down. He took his property and put tiny homes on it to help the homeless. And I guess the neighborhood doesn't want it. His argument, of course, is, well, you don't want them in your streets, but I'm giving them a place to stay. You don't want them there. Where are they supposed to go?
Well, my response to that is, if we don't manage the problem is going to manage us. No, so I understand people all the time when I talk about it, they go, well, how would you like it in your neighborhood? Well, there are 10 sober living homes within a half a mile of where I live. 10. I could actually, if I took a mile walk, which I won't, I can go by all 10 of those houses. And there's vans out front, but they're really well managed. You don't see people wandering around, and they're structured and they're managed. And, they charge people to live in the house, and then they take them in vans to a separate location so they can use their insurance to pay for their treatment. But that way they've got technically 24 hours of care get enough tools, and then when they want to go back to the mainstream, they kind of have this information that makes it hard to go back to where they were. They can, and they will probably, a lot will relapse, but it's a mechanism, if run right, works.
Yeah, well, very similar to your political story that you told of climbing that ladder. I would, human beings are like that in general. You know, what somebody down here cares about changes as their income changes, their families change. You know, I could understand why they wouldn't want a homeless shelter next door to their house that they work so hard to provide for their family. Are their kids safe? There's all kinds of questions, and I understand it. I just don't understand when the conversation shut down. Like when somebody's so dead set. To me, that's just somebody that's not willing to find a solution. They're just selfishly thinking of themselves only. It's not wrong necessarily. It's just not right also.
I ran 9 separate sites and housed 175 people for years in the middle of residential neighborhoods next to public transportation. And, you know, periodically a call would come in and we'd meet with the neighbor. We'd talk to him about it. And this one situation was interesting. It was I think it was a 12-unit apartment complex, and the neighbor across the street complained to the city council. And the city council called me personally, because I know the council member, and said, look, we've had a major complaint from someone in your neighborhood. I said, let me guess. Here's the address across the street. They'll confirm it. They won't tell you what it is. And we just wanted to give you a heads up. I said, is there anything special you want us to do? They go, not at this time. We just wanted you to know that there was a serious issue with one of our constituents. So, you know, I was housing people on parole and probation, and these guys are pretty clever. And I said, look, do me a favor, keep an eye on this guy. Don't approach. And if he makes any noise, just go back into your apartment. Don't worry about it. Just call me. And we found out that because the apartment complex we took over was where the drugs were being sold out of. That's how we happened to get a good deal. We took a drug house over. And the people that we were serving used to do drugs, but in order to live there, you have to be clean and sober. And we test for efficacy to make sure that people weren't using. And if they were, we'd move them to a different location, help them stabilize, and then they could come back as long as they demonstrated a willingness to stay in recovery. And if they didn't, you know, unfortunately, you have to let them hit the door, hit them in the butt on the way out. So it turns out this guy across the street, because he was seeing law enforcement come by and parole officers, and he was really worried that he was scared for his kids. Turns out he had he was in the pool business, and he was storing chemicals at his house, and he didn't want to get caught. So one day we had somebody call hazmat, and, you know, the hazard material people, they would stop by the house because we knew when he was getting his stuff taken off on, you know, the trucks and on pallets, and asked the question, what are you doing here? Anyway, within a month, he was gone, because what he was doing was even more harmful than what was going on in the house before we took it over. So,
right, yeah, people are afraid.
Yeah, they called me and thanked me and said, you're not going to believe what we found. I said, yeah, muriatic acid was sitting out there, and the guy would be gone for 2 or 3 days. It'd be on the pallet. Kids could go in and grab it, spill it, and hurt themselves. So, you know, he was pissed because he didn't want his business to slow down. And it wasn't, but he made such a fuss, he ended up kind of painting it in the corner. And what he was doing was wrong, illegal, and hazardous. So,
well, well, I think that was a good conversation, Scott. And next week we got a guest, I believe. So that'll be a good conversation. But This is your crisis coach with Scott H. Silverman and me, Fred Carroll. Every week we come on here. So all we ask is you subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast on Apple and or Spotify, or both is fine by us. The numbers matter. It's free. It costs us money, but it doesn't cost you any money. It's great. What a great marketplace. But there's value in it. All we want to do is help whoever is willing to listen. So everything, we're not doctors. Everything we say isn't necessarily going to save the world, but it's the conversation. We have the conversation, and it's an open conversation, and you're welcome to join us. You could connect with either one of us. Scott uses his phone number a lot. What's your phone number, Scott?
It is 619-993-2738. 619-993-2738. And I know when I stop giving out my number, then I'll be on the path to some form of semi-retirement. And I don't expect to do that for about 10 more years. So call me.
Yeah, you
text
got
me.
time.
Yeah, I got time.
You got time. Yeah, give them a call, text them, and make sure you're watching our videos. If you like what we're saying here, or whether you agree with it or not, share it with your friends, share it with strangers, share it on your Facebook or on your social media. But that's going to be it, Scott. You got anything else to say?
Over to you, brother.
Okay, it's all up to me. So if nobody has told you they love you today, we love you. And this is your crisis coach. And we will see you again next week. Goodbye, everyone.